Walt Disney by Neil Gabler. I'm not sure what it is about biographies that never get old for me. Maybe it's the glimpse of that person's viewpoint in history. Maybe it's the fact that the people that you're learning about are actually real and the things that are described in the books actually happened. That could be part of it. But as far as reviewing a biography, it's a little bit different. As far as the author goes, how it's written, how it's paced, how he chopped up Walt Disney's specific portions of his life and kind of spaced them out throughout the book, focusing obviously on the key moments of his life. All of that is excellent. Any of the dialogue built off of interviews and correspondence from Walt Disney all sounds believable. It doesn't sound too good, like almost like he was taking a little bit of an artistic license and kind of filling in the gaps to make the story better. So beyond that, then the content matter is really what's important. And with Walt Disney, you have the classic rags to riches story. But also on top of that, like so many other biographies that I've listened to, like with Tesla, Napoleon, Rockefeller, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, they all kind of have the same personality type. They're all very obsessive, very tunnel vision, extremely passionate, and just a tiny bit crazy. People who are normal, people who are balanced, people that only work 8 hours a day and take the weekends off and don't really like to rock the boat too much and take risks. Those aren't the people that build giant empires. And a lot of times it's not just one person. With Walt Disney, with Steve Jobs, Tesla, there's almost two sides. You have your creative person, who in this instance would be Walt Disney, but then there's also someone who's kind of almost backing him and keeping him under control. People like Walt Disney, they're almost a force of nature to be kind of managed and pointed in a direction, while you have that business-minded person to actually kind of make sure all the bills get paid, and to take the brainstorm of that super genius, crazy, passionate, creative person and somehow try to make some kind of financial sense out of their ideas. For Walt Disney, that was kind of his brother, and it almost seemed like a full-time job for him just to manage his brother, just to make sure he didn't bankrupt the company, try to make sure that they were able to pay the bills. And this book kind of captures the push-pull of those two ideals, the business side and the creative side, back and forth, and how they kind of balance each other out to create all the classic movies that we know about today. Now, obviously, they started out with all their shorts with Mickey Mouse and all those, which were really almost practice for the young studio, leading up to something greater. And so one thing with this book, it's like you'll never be able to sit down and watch Snow White the same way, or any of those other Disney classics, but specifically Snow White. They spend a lot of time on the development of that feature film. And now, obviously, looking back, you don't really understand the risks they were really taking by making that. It seems obvious now that animation could be used to tell a story, but back then they didn't really have the feature-length animation movies like we do today. Back then it was just the shorts, but Walt Disney, being the force of nature that he was, really wanted to tell a story of Snow White, feature length, color, sound, and he really wanted to be taken seriously, not just something for kids. He wanted it to be something the whole family could enjoy, adults too. And of course, when you're doing something like that, there's always going to be a pile of people that are going to tell you that it can't happen. For him, there was really no shortage. One thing that stands out is that this movie was going to happen no matter what anyone said. They didn't even have the financing secured before they began work on Snow White. Banks and everyone else that were basically in line to finance it thought it was too risky, thought it wasn't going to be able to recoup the investment that was going to be required for it. They couldn't even give an accurate number on how long it would take and how much money it would cost. And like any other cutting edge project, there was so many different challenges along the way, and the book kind of lays it out in exhaustive detail how hard it was just to get the animators required to make a feature length. And not only to get the animators required, but also to make a feature length movie and to have a consistent look of all the characters from beginning to end, a full movie. But of course, once word got out what Disney was doing, the best and the brightest animators in the business kind of flocked to him. They wanted to be part of basically making history. So just for kicks, after listening to this book, I actually bought a flipbook animation app on my pad, used my pencil just to try to do just a simple animation, just to kind of see. I don't claim to be a professional animator or anything like that. Just because you go to the hardware store and you buy a hammer, that does not make you a carpenter. After seeing a documentary on King Kong and how the stop motion was done, I actually animated some of my nephew's Legos. So for me, this sort of thing is kind of a hobby anyways. So I picked a very simple image. It's a logo, but at the heart of it, all it is some text and 3 lines, one for the head and back and 2 legs. That's all it is. It's a stick figure of a bird. Very simple, first time, flipbook animation on my pad. And the app that I got is basically a modern version of what they had. They had multiple pieces of paper, kind of like the onion skin, so they could see in the frame below. The app also comes with different brushes, colors, everything else you can imagine. Everything you would need to animate. It even has a feature for rotoscoping, but I'll get to that later. Now, originally, all I did was try to make wings pop out of the back and do one full rotation of flap. And then once you had basically your base, just kind of loop it, and you can loop it and cycle it as many times as you need for however long. But then what to do with the legs. I had it initially so the legs just kind of appeared along with the logo. So really you're not even animating 3 lines, you're just animating the 1 line. So Disney went out of their way to study different animals. They had a projection room with basically stock footage of critters walking and slowing it down and everything else, so they could study the motion and get it to look natural. And if you watch Snow White, you can kind of tell the difference between that animation technique and another animation technique called rotoscoping, where they would take a projector and project on on a wall, like on a piece of paper, and basically trace the outline of the image. So for Snow White, you can kind of see the difference in how she moves is so natural compared to the dwarfs. Now in the animation world, especially back then, that was kind of seen as cheating. So Walt Disney didn't like that it was being done for Snow White, but he tolerated it just because they were running out of time. So the app that I got has that same feature. So I went on YouTube and I found a tiny clip of a blue heron walking and eating something and ran that through the rotoscoping feature of the app. And all I did was I traced the back and I traced the legs, and then I got a little nuts and I started tracing the wings as it flapped around a little bit. And the result is you get a very natural looking motion, even though that it's just stick figures and kind of sketched on there. And I think it looks great, but that's just done with an amateur. So you can imagine professional animators, how they're able to blend the 2 techniques together. And just as an example, I strung the 2 together for the logo, the beginning being the rotoscoping, the legs also rotoscoping, and how it looks natural and the kind of the body moves along with it. And then I tried to blend the 2 into my sketch of the wings flapping. Not professional, I know, but still kind of a fun side project while listening to this book about them doing Snow White. And of course, it was a massive success that they would go on to repeat time and again with Sleeping Beauty and other classics. But the funny thing is, I also listened to Steve Jobs' book. So years later, after Steve Jobs was kicked out of Apple, he bought Pixar, and he bought it from George Lucas, who was going through a divorce. Now, it wasn't the company that we know of today. Obviously, it was in its infancy, but he loved the idea of using computers to tell a story with animation, and they tried their hand with animating small shorts, like with the famous lamp. But Steve Jobs kind of also wanted to tell a story and took it one step farther with using a computer to animate toys, and obviously that became Toy Story. But he had almost the exact same struggle, the exact same obsession, showing his friends clips of the movie, explaining it to people, driving people nuts, having a ton of people over to watch a rough cut of the movie that was maybe 3-4% better than the last time they watched it, and the time before that, and so on. And he kind of also had his own collection of naysayers saying, computers aren't powerful enough or able to animate anything, and it's just kind of a silly side project for Steve Jobs. But of course, Toy Story went on to win, I think, an Oscar. So there. So Walt Disney's obsessions didn't just stop at animation. Possibly my favorite part of the book is when he was kind of locked into a studio and he had all of his minions running around getting a miniature bottles, miniature people, train sets, everything under the sun that was tiny. And his brother was kind of a little glad that he was kind of keeping himself busy, out of the way, not really spending too much money and causing havoc, trying to reinvent another industry. So he was content to just leave him in his studio with all of his people, bringing him to build him his miniature town. And so finally his brother came and got him. He's like, hey, I want to show you what I've been working on. So he walks in there, he shows him this basic fantasy land, all sprawled out in the studio, all in miniature and tiny. And his brother's like, oh, cool, yeah, awesome. So then Walt looks at him and he says, cool, now let's build it for real. And of course that would be Disney World. So yeah, really cool book. Changed my perspective on Snow White and all those animated movies. Now kind of seeing what was involved, trying a little animation myself, just a teeny tiny little guy, but also the perspective of Walt Disney himself. Kind of always thought of him as a little bit of a nerdy kind of a guy, but after reading this book, he comes across as more of a lion. Let me know what you guys think if you've read it in the comments below, and I will talk to you next time.